The air in the studio was thick with something more than just dust and stale coffee. It was heavy with anticipation, with hope, and with a crushing weight of expectation. Elvis Presley stood in front of a mirror, not looking at his reflection so much as through it, trying to see the man who used to electrify millions with a single swivel of his hips or a knowing glance. It was 1968, and the world was changing. Elvis had been away, lost in a flurry of movies that felt more like a conveyor belt than an artistic journey. He'd made film after film, singing songs that felt hollow, playing characters that were forgettable. He missed the raw energy of live performance, the feeling of a guitar in his hands, the roar of a crowd that truly understood him. This TV special, simply titled Elvis, was supposed to be his big comeback, his chance to prove he wasn't just a movie star, but still the king of rock and roll. He adjusted the collar of his shirt, a plain black one, for now a contrast to the dazzling costumes he knew he'd wear on the night. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, had pushed for a Christmas special, something traditional and wholesome. But Elvis, with a newfound stubbornness that surprised even himself, had insisted on something different. He wanted to get back to his roots, to the blues and the gospel, to the raw rock and roll that had made him famous. He wanted to feel real again, nervous-y. Charlie Hodge, his longtime friend and assistant, asked softly from the doorway. Charlie knew Elvis better than almost anyone knew the subtle tells in his eyes, the way his jaw would tighten when he was deep in thought or worry. Elvis sighed, a sound that carried the burden of years. More than nervous, Charlie. I feel like I'm stepping onto a battlefield, and I don't even know who the enemy is. Myself, maybe. Or maybe the people out there who've forgotten who I am. He turned, leaning against the vanity table. It's been so long since I really felt the music, in the movies. It was always the same thing. Sing a song, kiss the girl, ride off into the sunset. It was easy money, sure, but it wasn't me. He ran a hand through his famously dark hair. I miss the sweat, the adrenaline, the way the crowd breathes with you. I miss the risk. Charlie nodded. They haven't forgotten, Elvis. They just need a reminder, and you're the only one who can give it to them. Elvis wished he could believe that with Charlie's easy confidence. He remembered the early days, the sheer chaos of his concerts, the screaming fans, the outrage from parents and critics. That raw power had been replaced by a polished, manufactured image. He had lost some of his fire. He knew it. He saw it in the lukewarm reviews of his latest films, in the dwindling number of hit records. The Beatles were everywhere. Rock music was evolving, and Elvis, once the undisputed monarch, felt like he was becoming a relic. Colonel Parker keeps talking about the ratings, the sponsors. Elvis continued, his voice a low rumble. He wants me to do Christmas carols, wear a Santa hat. I told him, no, this isn't about Christmas cheer. This is about showing them I can still sing, that I'm not just a pretty face in a movie. Pressure from the Colonel was constant, a quiet hum beneath the surface of every conversation. Colonel Parker saw the special as a strategic move, a way to boost record sales and movie contracts. Elvis saw it as a desperate plea, a chance to reclaim his identity before it was completely swallowed by Hollywood. He thought of Priscilla, his beautiful wife, back home. She believed in him fiercely, but even her unwavering support couldn't completely quiet the doubts gnawing at him. He knew millions would be watching, hoping to see the king return, but also perhaps ready to confirm that his time had passed. He walked to the window, looking out at the sprawling, bustling Los Angeles studio lot. Cars zipped by, people hurried with clipboards and costumes. It was a world of artifice, and he desperately wanted to break free of it. He wanted to sing his heart out, feel every note, every lyric, and let the truth of his music speak for itself. First rehearsals in an hour, Charlie reminded him gently. Band's already setting up. They're excited to play with you again, Elvis. You should see them. A flicker of a smile touched Elvis's lips. The band, his band, that was where the real magic lay. With Scotty Moore on guitar, DJ Fontana on drums. The musicians who had been there from the very beginning, who understood the language of his music without a single word being spoken. Maybe, just maybe, with them by his side, he could find that lost part of himself. Could shake off the dust of Hollywood and remember why he started singing. In the first place, he took a deep breath, the heavy air filling his lungs. This wasn't just a TV show. This was a battle for his soul, and he knew deep down that he had to win. He had to show the world, and more importantly himself, that the king was not dead. He was just getting ready to roar. The rehearsal studio was a cavernous space filled with cables, instrument cases, and the lingering scent of stale cigarette smoke. But for Elvis, it felt like coming home. The moment he walked in, he saw them. Scotty Moore already tuning his guitar, his fingers moving with practiced ease, DJ Fontana tapping out a rhythm on his snare drum, a quiet smile on his face, and a handful of other talented musicians. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," Scotty drawled, his eyes twinkling. He put down his guitar and walked over, offering a hand. "Heard you were finally breaking free from all those pretty girls and fast cars." Elvis laughed. A genuine, unburdened sound that surprised even himself. "Yeah, Scotty had enough of pretending. I knew how to milk a cow on camera. It's about time I remembered how to play some real music." He shook Scotty's hand firmly, then clapped DJ on the shoulder. "Good to see you, boys. Real good?" For the first few minutes, it was a little awkward. Elvis felt the eyes on him, the unspoken question. Is he still got it? He picked up his guitar, a worn acoustic, and strummed a few chords. His fingers, accustomed to the lighter touch required for movie scenes, felt a little stiff. But as he started to play a familiar blues riff, the stiffness began to melt away. "All right, let's start with something easy," Elvis said, trying to sound confident even if his heart was doing a drum solo. "How about, That's All Right, Mama?" Scotty's eyes lit up. "Now you're talking." The opening notes, simple yet electrifying, filled the room. Elvis's voice, a little rusty at first, found its rhythm. It wasn't the powerful roar it once was, not yet. But it was there, the unique blend of raw energy and soulful passion as they played. Something shifted, the awkwardness dissolved, replaced by the familiar camaraderie that only musicians who'd been through thick and thin together could share. Colonel Parker, true to form, made an appearance later, standing by the door with his usual cigar and an air of quiet observation. He didn't say much, just watched. Elvis could feel his gaze weighing. The colonel had wanted a glitzy, glamorous special full of holiday cheer. Elvis, along with director Steve Binder, had fought hard for a more stripped-down, authentic approach. A session that felt like a jam session, a return to the early days. During a break, Elvis walked over to him. "Well, Colonel, what do you think? Not exactly Silent Night, is it?" The colonel puffed on his cigar. "It's different, Elvis. Very raw. Are you sure the public wants raw? They're used to seeing you clean-cut, singing pretty songs." "The public wants truth," Colonel Elvis retorted, a hint of defiance in his voice. "They want to know if I'm still the same guy who started all this, and I want to show them I am." He looked the colonel straight in the eye. "I'm not doing any Christmas carols. This special is about rock and roll. It's about my music." Colonel narrowed his eyes, but then to Elvis's surprise a faint smile touched his lips. "All right, Elvis, have it your way. But remember, a gamble is a gamble. Just make sure it pays off." He turned and left, leaving Elvis with a mix of relief and renewed pressure. As the days turned into weeks, the rehearsals became less about remembering the songs and more about rediscovering the magic. Elvis spent hours with Scotty and DJ, just jamming, telling stories, and laughing. They played old hits, tried out new arrangements, and even ventured into gospel tunes, which had always been a deep part of Elvis's soul. He felt the tightness in his body ease, the stiffness in his voice soften. His hips started to move again, not with the wild abandon of his youth, but with a controlled, powerful swagger that was even more compelling. He was reconnecting with his body, his voice, his very essence as a performer. One afternoon, as they were working through Hound Dog, Elvis suddenly stopped the band. "No, no, wait," he said, shaking his head. It's not. It's not angry enough. It's not mean enough." He closed his eyes, remembering the first time he performed it, the raw, defiant energy. He hummed a few notes, then opened his eyes. "Okay, let's try it again, but this time imagine you're spitting fire. Imagine you've been wronged and you're letting it all out." The band exchanged glances, then nodded. When they launched into the song again, it was transformed. Elvis's voice was a snarl, a growl, full of an intensity that made the hair on Charlie Hodge's arms stand up. He moved across the makeshift stage, his body twisting, his face contorted with emotion. It wasn't just a song, it was a statement. When the last chord died, the room was silent for a moment, then erupted in scattered applause from the crew and band members. Elvis stood there, breathing heavily, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. He felt alive, truly alive, for the first time in years. "Now that's the Elvis I remember," Scotty said, picking up a towel to wipe his brow. Elvis winked. "He was just taking a long nap, Scotty. He's awake now." Path was still long and the nerves still simmered beneath the surface. But in that rehearsal studio, surrounded by the men who understood his music best, Elvis Presley was slowly, powerfully, beginning to find his way home. The king was stirring, and soon the whole world would hear his roar. The weeks leading up to the Elvis special were a whirlwind of activity, but for Elvis they felt less like work and more like a journey of rediscovery. Each day, each song, each shared laugh with his bandmates chipped away at the layers of Hollywood artifice that had built up around him. He wasn't just learning lines anymore. He was feeling lyrics. He wasn't just hitting marks. He was moving with the music. He found himself spending late nights in the studio, even after official rehearsals wrapped. Sometimes it was just him and a guitar picking out old gospel tunes that had soothed his soul since childhood. Other times, Scotty and D.J. would stick around and they'd fall into easy, spontaneous jam sessions. Just for the sheer joy of it, these were the moments that truly rekindled his fire. "Remember that time in Tupelo, Elvis?" D.J. mused one evening as they lounged on some worn-out amps, sipping cokes. "You were so hyped up, you nearly knocked the mic stand over with a hip wiggle." Elvis chuckled, a genuine, unburdened sound that surprised even himself. "I was just feeling the music." D.J., same as now. He looked around the empty studio, bathed in the soft glow of a few remaining work lights. "It's funny, you know, for years, I just showed up, sang the songs they gave me, said the lines. It was like I was watching myself from outside my own body." He sighed. "But here, with you guys playing these songs, it's like my soul is finally catching up with me. It's like I remember why I started all this in the first place." There were still moments of vulnerability, small cracks in his regained confidence. One afternoon, while working on a slower, more emotional song like "If I Can Dream," his voice cracked slightly. He stopped. Frustrated. "It's not good enough," he muttered, turning away from the microphone. "It doesn't have the conviction." "Steve Binder?" The director walked over, his expression calm. "Elvis, it's more than good enough. It's real. And that's what we want. Don't worry about perfection. Worry about truth." Elvis looked at him, then at his reflection in the dark studio glass. He saw the lines of worry around his eyes, but also a newfound determination. He took a deep breath and started the song again. This time he poured every ounce of his longing, his hope, his doubt, and his unwavering belief into the lyrics. His voice soared raw and powerful, filled with a soulful conviction that sent shivers down the spines of everyone. When he finished, there was a quiet, reverent silence in the studio. Even the usually unflattable Colonel Parker, who had walked in unnoticed, stood absolutely still, his cigar forgotten in his hand. "Now that's what I'm talking about," Bender said, his voice full of quiet awe. Elvis felt a warmth spread through him, a feeling of validation that went deeper than any applause. He hadn't just sung the song, he had become it. He also started to pay more attention to his physical appearance. He began working out, eating better. He wanted to look as good as he felt, to embody the energy he was rediscovering. He spent hours with his stage clothes, making sure they were just right. He wasn't just performing for a camera. He was performing for himself and for the fans who had stuck by him all these years. Priscilla visited the set, frequently bringing him home-cooked meals and words of encouragement. She saw the change in him, the light returning to his eyes. "You're back, Elvis," she told him one night after a particularly grueling rehearsal. "I can see it. You're shining again." Her words were a balm to his soul. Her belief in him was a constant source of strength. He knew this special wasn't just about his career. It was about their life together, about showing his family and friends that he was still the vibrant, passionate man they knew. As the production date loomed closer, the excitement in the studio became almost palpable. Tickets for the live tapings were snatched up in minutes. Crew, initially skeptical, were now fiercely loyal. Having witnessed Elvis's transformation firsthand, they saw not just a star, but a dedicated artist pouring his heart into his craft. One evening, after another electrifying rehearsal of Heartbreak Hotel, Elvis was signing a few autographs for some of the crew members. He looked at their faces, full of genuine admiration. It wasn't the manufactured adoration of a movie premiere. It was real appreciation for the music. "You really brought it today, Mr. Presley," one of the sound engineers said, his eyes wide. "I mean, I've heard your records, but seeing you live, it's a whole different thing." Elvis smiled, a true, easy smile. "Just getting warmed up," he said, winking. He walked out of the studio that night, a spring in his step that hadn't been there in years. The air still carried the weight of expectation, but now it felt lighter, tinged with a thrilling sense of possibility. He wasn't just hoping for a glimmer of hope. He was starting to see the full, glorious light of his own comeback. He was Elvis Presley, and he was ready to remind the world exactly who that was. The night before the first taping of the Elvis special felt like the longest night of Elvis's life. He was back at his Beverly Hills home, but sleep was a distant concept. His mansion, usually a bustling hub of activity, felt strangely quiet, amplifying the frantic rhythm of his own heartbeat. He wandered through the familiar rooms, a glass of water in hand, the cool California air drifting in through open windows. He could hear Priscilla softly humming in the bedroom, perhaps trying to coax herself to sleep. He didn't want to disturb her, not yet. He needed this quiet time, this solitary reckoning. He walked into his den, a room filled with guitars, records, and memorabilia from his career. Picked up an old photograph from a shelf, a faded black and white shot of him in his younger days, performing on stage, his face a mask of raw intensity, his hair falling wildly, a look of pure, unadulterated joy. He remembered that feeling, the sheer, intoxicating rush of connecting with an audience, of pouring every ounce of himself into a song. "God, I miss that feeling," he whispered to the silent room. He knew he was different now. Not just older, but scarred by the grind of the movie industry, the constant pressure to maintain an image. He wondered if he could still access that raw, untamed energy. The rehearsals had been good, even great at times. He'd felt the spark return, seen the excitement in his band's eyes, but this was the real deal. This was live. No retakes, no second chances. Millions some would be hoping for his triumphant return. Others, perhaps, would be waiting to see him fail to confirm their belief that the king's reign was over. The thought sent a jolt of anxiety through him. He thought of Colonel Parker's constant refrain. "It's a gamble, Elvis, a big gamble." The Colonel had initially wanted a safe, traditional Christmas special full of holiday cheer. Elvis had fought him tooth and nail, pushing for a raw, authentic rock and roll performance. He put everything on the line, his reputation, his career, even his personal sense of worth. "What if I mess up?" he mumbled, his voice raspy. "What if I can't deliver?" A soft hand touched his arm. Priscilla stood beside him, her eyes soft and understanding. She had emerged from the bedroom, drawn by his restlessness. "You won't mess up," she said, her voice a comforting whisper. "You're Elvis Presley. You were born for that stage." He turned to her, his gaze searching. "But am I still that Elvis, the one who captivated the world, or am I just a memory?" Priscilla gently took the photograph from his hand and placed it back on the shelf. She then turned his face towards her, her thumbs caressing his cheeks. "You're more than a memory, my love. You're stronger now. You've been through so much, and you've come out on the other side. That fire you had, it's still there. It's just burning, a little deeper, a little brighter." She led him to the sofa and sat beside him, leaning her head on his shoulder. "This isn't about proving anything to anyone else, Elvis. It's about proving it to yourself. It's about getting back to what you love, to what truly makes you happy." Her words were like a balm soothing the raw nerves. He leaned into her embrace, finding comfort in her warmth and quiet strength. "I just want to make them proud," he confessed, his voice barely audible. "My fans, my family, you—" "We're already proud," Priscilla said, pulling back slightly to look at him. "Just go out there and be the man I fell in love with, the man who sings from his soul." They sat there for a long time, not talking much, just existing in the quiet comfort of each other's presence. Elvis thought about the songs they would play, the energy he wanted to bring. He pictured the set, the audience, the cameras. He tried to visualize success, to push away the encroaching shadows of doubt. He thought about the band, his brothers in music. He remembered Scotty's easy grin, DJ's steady rhythm. They believed in him. Steve Binder. The director believed in him, fighting to give him the creative freedom he craved. And Priscilla always believed in him. Slowly, the frantic beating of his heart began to slow. The fear didn't vanish completely, but it receded, replaced by a growing sense of calm determination. This wasn't just a comeback. It was a reclaiming. Chance to shed the skin of his past mistakes and step into the future as the artist he was always meant to be. He stood up, pulling Priscilla gently with him. "You know what?" he said, a quiet resolve in his voice. "You're right, it's not about what they expect. It's about what I'm going to give them." He looked at her, a confident glint returning to his eyes. "I'm going to give them every single bit of myself. I'm going to sing my heart out, and I'm going to remember every reason I ever loved doing this." He still felt the weight of expectation, but now it felt less like a burden, and more like a challenge he was ready to meet head-on. The king was ready to take his throne back. The energy in the studio on show night was electric, thick enough to taste. Backstage, the air buzzed with nervous excitement. Crew members scurried makeup, artists dabbed, and musicians fidgeted with their instruments. Elvis, however, stood remarkably calm amidst the controlled chaos. He wore a sleek black leather suit, a stark contrast to the flashy outfits of his movie roles. This was the rebel Elvis, the original rock and roller. He took a deep breath, the scent of hairspray and old wood filling his lungs. He could hear the low hum of the audience just beyond the curtain, a murmur that promised an impending roar. Charlie Hodge gave him a thumbs up, his face beaming. Scotty and DJ exchanged a knowing glance, a silent pact of support. "You got this, E?" Charlie whispered, patting his back. Elvis nodded, a faint smile on his lips. The doubts that had plagued him the night before hadn't completely vanished, but they were held at bay by a surge of pure adrenaline. This was it, the moment of truth. The lights dimmed and a hush fell over the audience. A voice began setting the stage, building the suspense. Elvis could feel his heart pounding in his chest, a powerful rhythm mirroring the beat of the blues music that filled the intro. Then the iconic guitar riff of Trouble ripped through the speakers. It was raw, gritty, and defiant. The crowd gasped, then erupted into a cheer. Elvis stepped out from behind the curtain, bathed in a blinding white spotlight. The roar of the audience hit him like a physical wave. For a second, he was overwhelmed, a flood of memories washing over him. The screaming girls, the flashing cameras, the sheer exhilaration of his early concerts. But then, He saw them, not just a sea of faces, but individual eyes, filled with anticipation, love, and a desperate hope. He saw belief, and in that instant something clicked. The nervousness melted away, replaced by a surge of pure, unadulterated power. He moved to the microphone, his leather suit gleaming under the lights. His eyes, dark and intense, scanned the crowd. He looked thinner, sharper than in his movie roles, radiating an intensity that was undeniable. "If you're looking for trouble," he growled into the microphone, his voice a low, bluesy rumble that sent shivers through the crowd. "You've come to the right place," the crowd screamed. It wasn't just applause. It was an explosion of pent-up emotion, a release of years of waiting. Elvis grinned, a genuine magnetic smile that lit up his face. He was home. He launched into trouble with a primal energy, his body swaying, his hips starting to move with that familiar, mesmerizing rhythm. His voice was strong, confident, imbued with a newfound edge that was both dangerous and captivating. He commanded the stage, owning every inch of it, every single gaze in the audience. Cameras rolled, capturing every nuance, every bead of sweat that started to form on his brow. He transitioned back into Guitar Man. Then Lawdy, Miss Claudie, each song a testament to his roots, his passion, his undeniable talent. He interacted with the band, the familiar faces, a grounding presence. He joked, he laughed, he teased, all while delivering powerhouse vocals and electrifying guitar riffs. It wasn't a stiff, planned performance. It was organic, alive, breathing. The audience was completely captivated. They hung on his every word, every note. Women screamed, men cheered. It was the Elvis they remembered, but also a new, more mature, more profound Elvis. He wasn't just performing songs, he was telling his story through his music. During a quieter moment, he sat on a stool, just him and his acoustic guitar. Bathed in a single spotlight, he looked out at the faces, their expressions rapt. Played a medley of his classic hits, stripped down, raw, and incredibly moving. His voice, clear and pure, filled the studio, reaching deep into the hearts of everyone listening. He sang "Love Me Tender," and the whole audience seemed to sway with him. He sang "Heartbreak Hotel," and you could feel the pain and passion in every note. He was vulnerable, yet utterly in control. He was giving them everything, holding nothing back. The first segment of the special, the sit-down portion, was a revelation. It felt like a private concert for a few hundred friends rather than a national television event. Elvis was nadic, charming, and undeniably human. Talked about his journey, his music, his gratitude for his fans. He was in his element, truly. The king was not just on stage. He was reclaiming his throne, one powerful note at a time. The air crackled with his energy. A tangible force that promised something legendary was unfolding before their very eyes. He could feel it. The audience could feel it. And for the first time in a long time, Elvis Presley felt truly, completely himself. The show was building to a crescendo. Elvis had moved into the stand-up portion, surrounded by his band, his energy absolutely boundless. He had shed the acoustic guitar and was now wielding an electric, the raw power of his voice and stage presence filling every corner of the studio. The audience was in a frenzy, shouting his name, singing along, completely enthralled. He had just finished a blistering version of Jailhouse Rock, his movements sharp, precise, yet full of the old Elvis swagger. The applause was deafening, a tidal wave of adoration. Elvis grinned, sweat glistening on his brow, the sheer joy of performing radiating from him. He loved this. This was where he belonged. He took a moment, letting the applause wash over him, feeding off the energy. He lifted the microphone, ready to introduce the next song. Perhaps Blue Suede Shoes or Hound Dog caught the eye of a fan in the front row, giving them a quick wink, and the crowd screamed louder. And then it happened. Cutting through the roar of the crowd, a single harsh voice sliced through the air like a jagged shard of glass. "Go back to your movies, Elvis. You're washed up." The words, though just a few, were amplified by the sudden, shocked silence that rippled through the studio. It was as if someone had pulled the plug on the entire show. The music died in the air. The applause faltered, and a collective gasp went through the audience. Elvis, who had been smiling just moments before, froze, his hand, still holding the microphone, lowered slightly. His eyes, which had been sparkling with exhilaration, clouded over. He wasn't used to direct confrontation like this, especially not in a live setting. In the movies, the lines were scripted, the reactions controlled. Here it was raw, unpredictable. He instinctively looked in the direction of the voice. It came from somewhere near the back, a man slightly slouched, his face obscured by shadow, but his voice carrying an unmistakable sneer. The heckler seemed to be reveling in the sudden silence, pleased by the disruption he had caused. The band members exchanged worried glances. Charlie Hodge, standing just off stage, clenched his fist. The stage manager's face went white. Television cameras still rolling captured the moment of stunned silence, the air thick with tension. Though it was only a few seconds, every eye in the studio was on Elvis, waiting. What would he do? Would he explode in anger? Would he crumble under the unexpected attack? Would he ignore it and try to push through? The smile had vanished from Elvis's face. His jaw tightened. For a fleeting moment, a flicker of the old anger, the frustration he'd felt about his career, the doubt that had haunted him for years, seemed to pass through his eyes. It was as if the heckler's words had struck a raw nerve, hitting every insecurity he had fought so hard to overcome. The audience, previously so boisterous, was now completely still, holding their breath. This wasn't just about a show anymore. It was about pride, about respect, about the very essence of the king. The silence grew heavier, almost suffocating. The heckler, emboldened by the lack of immediate response, let out a sneering laugh. "Yeah, that's right, King. Go on, run away." A wave of murmurs started to rise from the audience, a mix of anger at the heckler and concern for Elvis. Some fans started to shout back at the disruptor, telling him to shut up, but Elvis didn't react to them. His gaze remained fixed, not on the heckler, but somewhere beyond him, as if seeing something only he could perceive. His chest rose and fell with a deep, slow breath. His eyes, though still intense, seemed to lose the flicker of anger and gain a different kind of focus. It was a look of profound understanding, of acceptance, and then slowly, a dangerous spark. He still held the microphone. The band was ready, guitars at the ready, waiting for his signal. They trusted him implicitly, knowing he would handle it whatever it was. Elvis's mouth, which had been a tight line, began to curve slowly, deliberately, into a smile. Not a nervous smile, or a pained one, but a knowing, almost mischievous grin. It was the smile of a man who had just been handed a challenge, and who was about to turn it into his greatest triumph. The silence in the studio remained a stark, profound moment of anticipation. Everyone leaned forward, hearts pounding, waiting to see how the king would respond to this unexpected brazen assault. They knew intuitively that whatever he did next, it would be legendary. The heckler's sneering laughter echoed in the sudden, cavernous silence of the studio. It was a sound designed to provoke, to diminish, to tear down. But Elvis Presley, standing alone in the blinding spotlight, didn't flinch. His initial reaction, the flicker of hurt, the tightening of his jaw, had vanished, replaced by an unnerving stillness. He didn't rush to respond. He didn't shout back. He simply stood there, absorbing the insult, letting it hang in the air, a challenge thrown directly at him. The crew on the sidelines held their breath. "Steve Binder," the director watched from his monitor, a knot of worry in his stomach. This was live television. One wrong move, one lost temper, and the entire comeback could unravel. Elvis's eyes, dark and piercing, finally landed on the heckler, who, emboldened by the lack of immediate retaliation, seemed to puff out his chest slightly. But there was no anger in Elvis's gaze, no fiery retort forming on his lips. Instead, there was a strange, almost serene quality to his expression. He slowly, deliberately raised the microphone closer to his lips. The entire studio seemed to lean in, desperate to hear what he would say. The camera zoomed in on his face, capturing every subtle shift in his expression. He took another slow, deep breath, his chest expanding under the black leather. It was a moment of profound calm, a center within the storm. He wasn't just breathing, he was gathering himself, pulling every ounce of his courage, his artistry, and his years of experience into focus. Then, with a gentle, almost imperceptible nod, he signaled to the band. Scotty Moore, ever intuitive. Picked up on it, he exchanged a quick glance with DJ Fontana. The message was clear. Wait for it. Be ready. Elvis's gaze swept across the rest of the audience, past the heckler, acknowledging the hundreds of faces filled with concern, support, and unwavering loyalty. He saw the love in their eyes, the faith they had in him, and it was as if that collective belief washed over him, cleansing him of any lingering doubt. He was silent for another beat, letting the tension build, letting the anticipation become almost unbearable. It was a master class in stage presence, a demonstration of raw power. Without uttering a single word, he was taking control of the moment, not by reacting, but by simply. And then, a tiny, almost imperceptible curve formed at the corner of his mouth. It grew slowly into a faint, knowing smile. It wasn't a smile of amusement or even triumph, but one of deep understanding. It was the smile of a man who had faced his demons, conquered his fears, and now was utterly comfortable in his own skin. You know, Elvis's voice finally broke the silence, calm and clear, cutting through the studio with astonishing clarity. It's funny. His voice was a low, steady rumble, completely devoid of anger or defensiveness. The heckler, who had been expecting a shouted response, or perhaps for Elvis to simply walk off stage, seemed to deflate slightly. Elvis paused, letting his words sink in. He looked directly at the heckler again, his eyes holding a direct, unwavering gaze. A lot of people, he continued, his voice gaining a quiet intensity, have tried to tell me who I am, or who I should be. For a long time, I even started to believe him. He shifted his weight, adjusting the microphone. Stand slightly, a casual, confident movement. They told me to sing this, to act that way, to make these movies, and for a while I did. He shrugged, a slight, almost regretful gesture. But I realized something, folks. I realized that the only person who gets to decide who Elvis Presley is me. His gaze sharpened, locking onto the heckler again, but without malice. And to the gentleman who just told me to go back to my movie, he paused. Then his smile widened, a confident, almost mischievous glint in his eyes. Well, sir, you might be right about one thing. The audience held its breath, wondering where he was going with this. Maybe I do look washed up to you, Elvis continued, his voice now a low, dangerous growl, full of an electrifying blend of challenge and conviction. Maybe you think my time is over. He leaned into the microphone, his eyes blazing with a renewed fire, the true spark of the king returning. But I'm here tonight for the people who do believe. His voice rose, filling the studio with powerful resonance. I'm here for the people who know that the music, the real music, it never dies. He paused, letting the statement hang in the air, a defiant declaration. Then his eyes met Scotty Moore's, a silent signal passing between them. Scotty grinned, picking up his guitar. DJ Fontana nodded, his drumsticks poised. And tonight, Elvis declared, his voice ringing with absolute certainty, I'm gonna prove it to you. I'm gonna show you that the king ain't dead. He's just been waiting for the right moment to remind you who he is. With a final confident nod, he turned his back on the heckler, dismissing him entirely, and faced the roaring, utterly captivated audience. The spark had ignited. The legendary comeback was about to explode. The roar of the crowd, which had been building during Elvis's powerful declaration, exploded as he turned from the heckler and faced them directly. It was a sound of collective relief, admiration, and pure, unadulterated excitement. He hadn't just deflected the insult, he had turned it into a springboard for an even more profound statement. You want to see if the king still got it? Elvis challenged, his voice dripping with playful defiance, his eyes gleaming with renewed fire. "You want to know if the music still lives?" He gave a sharp nod to Scotty Moore. "All right, boy-winning chords ripped through the speakers. Not a slow ballad, not a gentle melody. 'Twas the raw, snarling, electrifying intro to Blue Suede Shoes. But it wasn't just a familiar rock and roll classic, it was infused with a new, almost aggressive energy. A defiant edge that screamed, 'I'm still here, and I'm stronger than ever.'" Elvis launched into the lyrics, his voice a powerful, resonant force. He wasn't just singing, he was performing an act of pure musical rebellion. His hips moved with an almost dangerous swagger. His hands gripped the microphone as if it were a weapon. His eyes burned with an intensity that could set the stage alight. He stalked across the stage, every step a declaration, pointed at the audience, inviting them into his defiant energy. He moved to the edge of the stage, leaning out his presence, overwhelming the entire space. The audience, already on their feet, roared their approval. They clapped, they shouted, they danced in the aisles. The heckler, who had dared to challenge the king, was now completely lost in the wave of adulation, silenced by the sheer force of Elvis's triumphant return. During the guitar solo, Elvis didn't just stand there. He moved with the music, his body a conduit for the electric energy emanating from Scotty's fingers. He owned the stage, owned the moment, owned his legacy. He wasn't just singing Blue Suede Shoes, he was singing his life story. The story of a boy from Tupelo who dared to be different, who faced criticism and doubt, but never stopped believing in the power of his music. As the song reached its climax, Elvis threw his head back, letting out a primal, powerful roar that resonated deep within the chest of every person in the room. He ended the song with a dramatic flourish, a final chord that hung in the air like a lingering echo of his triumph. The applause that followed was deafening, a sustained explosion of cheers, whistles, and shouts of "Elvis, Elvis, Elvis!" It wasn't just for the song, it was for the moment, for his legendary comeback, for the way he had faced adversity and turned it into his greatest victory. He stood there breathing heavily, sweat dripping down his temples, a triumphant grin plastered across his face. He looked out at the sea of adoring faces, and in their eyes he saw not just fans, but believers. "Thank you. Thank you very much," he said, his voice husky but beaming. He gave a nod of respect to his band, who were also grinning, exhilarated by the raw power of the performance. He didn't address the heckler again, didn't even glance in his direction. The heckler had become irrelevant, swallowed by the sheer magnitude of Elvis's response. Performance itself was the ultimate answer, the undeniable proof that the king was back stronger and more vibrant than ever. The rest of the special was an absolute master class. Elvis, fueled by the adrenaline of that moment, performed with an unleashed passion that stunned everyone. He sang, "If I Can Dream," with a newfound urgency, his voice soaring with hope and conviction. He sang Heartbreak Hotel with a raw bluesy edge that was almost painful in its intensity. Every note, every lyric, every move was imbued with the power of his comeback. He wasn't just going through the motions. He was pouring his entire soul into the performance, reminding everyone why he was called the King. Backstage during a quick break, Steve Binder rushed over to him, his face alight with excitement. "Elvis, that was incredible. Legendary. That's going to be talked about for years." Elvis just winked, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his cheek. "Just proving a point, Steve. Just proving a point." The energy on stage was electric, pulsating with the raw power of a man who had faced his demons, looked his critics in the eye, and roared back with the full force of his undeniable talent. The king was truly reborn, his crown shining brighter than ever before. The final chords of the Elvis special echoed through the studio, followed by a thunderous, seemingly endless roar from the audience. Elvis stood center stage, bathed in a single spotlight, his chest heaving, sweat pouring down his face. But his eyes were shining with a brilliant, undeniable light. He had done it. He had truly, completely come back. The applause continued for what felt like an eternity. a standing ovation that transcended mere appreciation. It was a collective outpouring of love, relief, and awe. People were wiping tears from their eyes, cheering themselves hoarse, overcome by the sheer power of what they had just witnessed. Elvis smiled a genuine, heartfelt grin that reached his eyes. He gave a low bow, then blew kisses to the crowd, his gratitude palpable. As the cameras faded out and the house lights came up, the stage was instantly swarmed by his band members, the crew, and a beaming Steve Binder. "Elvis, that was phenomenal," Binder exclaimed, grabbing his arm. "The Heckler moment, absolute gold. You turned it into magic." Charlie Hodge rushed over with a towel and a bottle of water. "You were magnificent, E. Absolutely magnificent." Scotty and D.J. clapped him on the back, their faces beaming with pride. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a shared victory that went beyond just a successful show. They had helped bring their friend, their king, back to life. As Elvis made his way backstage, still buzzing with adrenaline, he saw Priscilla rushing towards him, her eyes glistening. She threw her arms around him, hugging him tightly. "You were incredible, Elvis," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. You... He held her close, feeling the last vestiges of doubt finally crumble away. Her belief, their shared journey, had culminated in this moment of triumph. "I felt it, Pris," he murmured into her hair. "I felt it again, the real me." Colonel Parker, usually reserved, even stoic, stood waiting. He cleared his throat, a rare tremor in his voice. "Well, Elvis," he began, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. "It seems my gamble paid off. Quite the showman, even when unscripted." He reached out and clapped Elvis firmly on the shoulder, a gesture of genuine if restrained pride. "You silenced them all tonight, son. Every single one." Elvis just nodded, knowing exactly what the Colonel meant. Not just the heckler, but all the critics, all the doubters, all the voices that had told him his time was over. The celebratory mood in the dressing room was electric, champagne corks popped, laughter filled the air. Calls started coming in from network executives, fellow musicians, friends, all showering him with praise. The initial reviews already filtering in were overwhelmingly positive. "Elvis Presley is back," screamed one headline. "The King reclaims his throne in electrifying special," declared another. A defiant, triumphant return to form. One critic specifically mentioned the Heckler incident, describing it as a master class in professional composure and raw star power, noting how Elvis had turned an act of malice into a moment of legendary defiance. His calm, powerful response, followed by the blistering performance of Blue Suede Shoes, was being hailed as the defining moment of the entire special. Elvis sat on the couch, exhausted but exhilarated, his arm around Priscilla. He listened to the joyous chatter around him, the clinking of glasses, the relief and excitement in everyone's voices. He looked at his hands calloused from weeks of guitar practice, then at the satisfied faces of his band. This wasn't just a comeback in terms of ratings or record sales. This was a personal victory. He had faced his fears, confronted his insecurities, and dared to be himself again. He had reminded the world, and more importantly, himself, that the raw, passionate artist was still there, vibrant and alive. The night had been long, challenging, and utterly unforgettable. He had walked onto that stage carrying the weight of years of misdirection, of lost identity. He had left it, not just a performer, but a legend, reborn, his spirit renewed, his voice once again resonating with the truth of his soul. King was not just back, he was more powerful, more authentic, and more beloved than ever before. The impact of the Elvis special was immediate and profound. It wasn't just a hit. It was a phenomenon. Millions tuned in across the nation, and the next morning the buzz was everywhere. Water coolers, diners, workplaces, everyone was talking about Elvis. The reviews were ecstatic, praising his raw energy, his powerful vocals, and the sheer charisma that oozed from every frame. But the moment that truly cemented the special's legendary status was his handling of the heckler. That brief, tense silence, followed by Elvis's calm, defiant declaration and the explosive blue suede shoes, became the stuff of legend almost instantly. It was replayed on news programs, discussed on radio shows, and dissected by critics as a pivotal moment in live television history. He didn't just sing, he fought back with his art. One critic wrote, "He didn't just perform, he dared to be vulnerable, and then utterly triumphant." The special relaunched Elvis's career with an unparalleled force. Record sales skyrocketed. His next single, "If I Can Dream," a powerful ballad from the special, became a top 10 hit, its lyrics resonating deeply with a nation that had just witnessed his personal and artistic struggle. The success of the special paved the way for his iconic Las Vegas residency. He returned to live performances, not as a fading star, but as a renewed, electrifying force of nature. The audiences were bigger, louder, more fervent than ever. He shed the movie star persona, entirely embracing the stage, with a passion he hadn't shown in years. Elvis felt a profound sense of liberation. The success wasn't just about fame or money anymore. It was about the freedom to be himself, to create the music he truly believed in. He spent more time in the studio, experimenting, pushing boundaries, his voice richer, more nuanced, and full of a soulful depth that only experience could bring. He often thought about that night, about the heckler. He never knew who the man was, or what his motivations were, but in a strange way he was grateful. That moment of unexpected challenge had forced him to dig deeper, to find a strength he didn't realize he still possessed. It was the catalyst that ignited the spark he had been searching for. One evening, a few months after the special aired, Elvis was back in the studio working on new material. He was smiling, relaxed, completely in his element. Charlie Hodge walked in, holding a stack of fan mail. "Got a letter here," Charlie said, picking one out, "from a guy in Ohio. Said he was having a really rough time, felt like a failure, and when he saw you stand up to that guy, he said it changed something in him, gave him hope." Elvis took the letter. Reading the heartfelt words, a warmth spread through him. It wasn't just about the music. It was about connection. Albert's calming nature, he realized his comeback wasn't just for him. It was for all the people who felt like they had lost their way, who needed a reminder that it was always possible to rise again. His relationship with Priscilla also flourished. Comeback had brought them closer, a shared triumph after years of distant struggles. She saw him happy, truly happy, for the first time in a long while. The image of Elvis in his black leather suit, guitar in hand, facing down a critic with nothing but raw talent and unwavering conviction, became an enduring symbol. It wasn't just a moment in a TV show, it was a testament to resilience, to the power of art, and to the enduring spirit of a true original. Elvis Presley would go on to achieve even greater heights, but that 1968 special, and particularly that one moment, remained a defining chapter. It was the night he didn't just make a comeback, he created a legend. Years passed. Elvis continued to evolve, his music reaching new audiences, his legacy growing with every passing decade. But whenever fans old and new spoke of his greatest performances, that night in 1968 would always come up. The night a heckler tried to tear him down, and the king of rock and roll rose, not just to defy, but to soar. His music would live forever, an undeniable force in the annals of popular culture. But his response to that heckler, his unwavering belief in himself and his art in the face of doubt, carved out an equally powerful place in history. It was a heartwarming story of resilience, courage, and the timeless power of true artistry. The king truly lives, not just in song, but in the legendary spirit he showed that unforgettable night.